applause for me.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a great topic, one of my favorite, bootstrapping. Yes, no, the good, the bad, the ugly. Before I start, the usual question I ask, who knows Signavio? Who's heard about us? Okay. And you actually know what we're doing, or you don't really? Yeah, okay, kind of. Okay, so I spent maybe 30 seconds on what we do, and then, really talk about the interesting stuff. So what we earn our money with, we're a SaaS provider, software as a service provider. We work with mid-sized, large organizations, and we help them analyze, improve, reinvent operations. So for example, 2 customers that joined today, Real Supermärkte and Hornbach. They just signed up today. So we help them with inventory management, supply chain, all kinds of operational questions where they feel they have to be better from an operational perspective. And we have planning tools and automation tools for those types of companies. Maybe a little bit of facts and figures about Signavio. The company was founded 2009. The history goes a little bit, started a little bit earlier. I'll talk about that in a minute. We are, as of today, 230 employees. On Monday, we will be 250, because my colleagues told me 20 new employees, 20 new colleagues are starting next week. We are headquartered here in Berlin, but present around the world. We have bootstrapped for a long time. I'll talk about that. That's why I'm here. But we also decided at a later stage to raise some capital. So we raised, roughly 50 million so far. Doing cautious rounds, just enough to fund the necessary. And the one thing that we're most proud about is we were ranked the second best employer in town on Kununu, so through anonymous reviews. We didn't buy them. It was honest feedback from people. Okay, good. So, but the one thing, and this is my main slide for today, my placeholder, and I can drop this thing here, is to talk about the path that we took and how we got to where we are today. Because for most of the history of the company, we have been operating in a bootstrapping mode. So a little bit of history, where Signavio comes from. So I'm an engineer by background. So I wrote software code when it was still uncool to write software code, when you were still considered a nerd, and girls would avoid you. Suddenly it became cool to be in software. Okay, that was a little bit of luck is always involved. I stayed at university a little longer than my friends because I studied faster than them, and I thought it was uncool to be the first one to enter the workplace while they were still having fun as students. So I did a PhD so I could be the supervisor of all of my friends. And this is where I also had a lot of time to work on interesting projects. So we started an open source project called Oryx back in the days. Building back in the days, 2006, to build the first web-based drawing tool. So something that as PowerPoint, Visio, drawing stuff. We were one of the first ones to build that in the web browser. We thought that would be a cool idea, and everything would move into the web. And this is a great technical challenge to do. So we started doing that, and we received a lot of traction, a lot of people signing up to our prototypes. We had no commercial afterthought for the technology that we had, and the company of Signavio actually only came into being because we were so in love with the technology that we had built that we were desperately trying to find a way to make it survive, right? Because with every open source project, as soon as key members leave, as soon as funding runs out, as soon in our case we leave university, we knew that the project would die. So we were, the reason for Signavio to be was actually to find a way how to fund basically being able to work on this open source project. And at the time, so this was 2008, 2009, in Berlin there was no money around. This was financial crisis, VCs, and so they were just starting to set up shop here. I did work in the Hasso-Plattner Institute, so there was some ecosystem. There was the Hasso-Plattner Ventures, who were very eager to put money into companies that were built by HPI graduates. They also came to us with their bags of money and tried to unload it on our company. But many of my friends, they had taken that path and had raised money very, very early on. And the typical pattern was that 6 months into, 6 months after funding, they basically lost their job because things were not working properly. And the VCs thought that the best thing would be to exchange the CEO and the founders and put some real people in place to run the business. So this was basically what scared us away a little bit in the early days. And also our experience with business angels at the time in Berlin was that the typical business angel here in the city was a seasoned Siemens manager or from some other, let's say, old economy company. And so when we pitched our idea, they said, "And where's your mobile app?" And we said, "We don't have a mobile app." And they said, "But without a mobile app, I can't brag about my investment with my friends." And we said, "Okay, it seems like you have a very good understanding about what we're doing." So that was a very frustrating experience. And we felt that every minute that we spent pitching, this felt like such a waste of time. Because people, they were, I don't know, they seemed to not get it. And they said there's no market for what you're doing, and aren't there these humongous companies out there who throw out competing products for free? And we said yes. And they said, "So how are you going to make money?" And we said, "Because we think we can make money," right? So this is not a good enough explanation. So we started shifting our time from pitching to angels and VCs, and spent that time exclusively with customers and people who were interested in the stuff that we were doing. We were very, very lucky because we ran into very interested companies very early on. And one customer for us was super defining, and that was a super avant-garde, risk-taking, technology-loving company here in the region, and that was the AOK Brandenburg. They were so advanced in technology, you wouldn't believe it, right? They loved us because we were perceived as the nerds that come in and show them cool, new, fancy stuff. So for example, this one day, I brought something super amazing, which worked like this. You know what that is? That was Google Maps on the iPad. Can you believe that? They loved us for showing tech, so they didn't really care too much about what we were building, but they loved having us around. So this is how we got our first customer, because they just wanted a reason for us to be around more. And we basically talked them into buying our product. They spent $100K for the product. So that was pretty fascinating. Because we showed our product. They were requiring something like this. They had a competing product from Software AG. They had to renew their licenses, and they said they hated the vendor, they hated the software. If you can build something similar, then you'll get the deal. And they asked the question, "So how much does it cost?" Right? And I said, "I don't know. What do you think it's worth?" "Well, I don't know. You have to tell me." And so we came up with I said 100K. 100K. I wanted to scare them away. They said, "Okay, fine, here's the signature." I said, "Damn." Too cheap. Anyways, so this was basically the lucky starting point for us, but actually the only customer that we have for the only customer that we had for the first 12 months or so. So we funded the business, through this 100K that we got through AOK Health Insurance, and the usual grants and public money that you can get in Berlin. So the Exist Gründerstipendium, which we took, which was I think 90K, and which we redirected to pay interns. So we didn't pay the money to ourselves, because we still felt we don't need much money. So rent was a little cheaper back then. I paid 225 euros, warm, for my apartment. So I had living costs of 400 euros every month. You know these 60-cent Tütensuppen where you pour hot water on it? You can survive for months on Tütensuppen. They're not expensive. And for 30 cents you can get aufbackbare Brötchen and Scheiblettenkäse. It's great nutrition. 400 euros. That's all you need a month. So, so we redirected all the money that we got through X's Gründerstipendium, and and some other things from universities. They give you money and so on and so on. So we had probably, we did have funding, if you will. We did have funding of probably $250,000 for the first 12 to 18 months, but that came through, not through VC, seed, business angel stuff, but through the first customer, plus a couple of extra tricks to get money in. So we hired a big team from day one. So we had, when we founded the company, that was May 2009, we had 12 employees from the get-go. Was 4 founders, 0 salary, and 8 interns. They got 400 euros salary, or 500 or so. So this was our team, and which gave us a lot of speed to actually build the company. But like half a year in or so half a year after we had sold to AOK, we thought our product now is ready to be taken to many other customers, and we actually leveraged all of the opportunities that we could get for cheap money. So for example, we went to these events and congresses, and always told everybody, we don't have any money. Our stuff is so cool that your event sucks if you don't let us present it. Right? It will be a lame event if you don't have a presentation by us. Okay, we can give you 80% discount on the sponsorship fee. How much is that? 2,000 euros. We do it for 1. Okay, so it worked. So people gave us a forum. They allowed us to go to these events, for example, or congresses, and present our stuff, because we sell to a pretty old school audience. So they are not the kinds of people that where you have digital marketing and convert them through and all of that. You actually meet them and you hand over business cards and you have a suit on and all of that stuff, right? So so that worked out great. And the interesting thing that we found was that we received a lot of interest in the messaging that we did. So we basically had, so our vision was, process management, the space that we operate in, is great, and we didn't invent this. Software has been around since the 80s. But we said, the one thing that is different now is you have to do it with, the wisdom of the crowd, right? Before it was very few experts knowing how to run operations perfectly. Now it's about tapping into the brains of everybody in the organization, and that way you get the best possible results. And that resonated really well. And so people got very interested in this approach. And the new type of software. We basically only said that because we were looking for something where we could argue we were better than the others, because we only had 2% of the functionality from everybody else, right? So if it was about sophisticated analysis and all of these things, everybody else was so much better. But because we were the only ones web-based, it was so easy to pass on a link. And you can't do that with a desktop application. So we just claimed, passing on a link is the coolest thing on earth. And this is required to get people to talk to each other and collaborate, and it worked. So, but the interesting finding was that although we generated a lot of interest, nobody bought. That's the most horrible feeling that you have, because you feel like, out of the people I went to university with, probably 30-40% of them founded companies. It seemed to be on vogue at those times. And the one thing we didn't want to become was a company that just languishes. Is that the English word? Like dümpeln in German, right? We didn't want to be this company that dümpels for years. Dümpeln is the worst thing. Dümpeln means you work 80 hours a week and you're not making any step forward. Right? You think you are working on this super great thing that that the planet needs, and everybody else around you thinks that you are totally crazy, right? And that's not going anywhere, and it's a waste of time. You could have these great jobs, and your parents start talking, well, all of your friends, and so we said to ourselves, this is what we don't want to be, because after you dumpe for 4 or 5 years, this is very frustrating. So, and we had the strange feeling that we were about to dumpe. So we had this one customer who paid us a significant amount of money. We had a lot of people who showed interest, or we just thought they show interest, right? Sometimes you are not sure what is the reality and what is just, pictures in your head. And but nobody was signing. So this was in late 2009 when we decided, because we had some money on the bank account, we decided we need to hire a sales guy. Right? We're all engineers. We don't know how to sell. So we need a sales guy to teach us do it. And so we hired him, and probably 90% of our budget, 90% of our monthly budget went to his paycheck. Because sales guys, if they're good at one thing, is selling themselves. If they can't even sell themselves, they won't sell your product. Rule number 1, if you hire a sales guy. So he ate up 90% of our budget. So we said, teach us how to do it. And we want to learn. But it was interesting because it didn't have any impact, and we still were not selling anything. But it was a good learning experience, right? So what is a buying signal, right? What is, how do you do objection handling? How do you get the commitment to close a deal and all of that? How do you manage a sales cycle? It's great. It's great. It was a fantastic learning. Actually, I'm a big fan of sales and how to do sales. I run a podcast. If you are interested, I don't make any money out of this. It's just because it's fun doing it. The Art of Sales, if you want to check it out. Anyways, so what helped us? I asked the question. So what do you want to get out of my talk? And the question was, how did you get from 10 to 100 customers? And maybe shedding some light on that. So our trick was that we were lacking credibility in the market. This was the number one thing that we were lacking. We were not lacking speed. So by speed, I mean you have a phone call on Friday, and you talk to the customer that you're going to meet, or prospect that you're going to meet on Monday, and you ask him what he wants to see, what's super important for him. And then you tell him, we have that. And he says, that would be awesome. Can I see it? And say, sure. And you build it over the weekend. That's what I mean by fast, right? So we had no lack of speed, but we had a lack of credibility in the market. So people would say, yeah, but you're so young, and I mean, we're Hornbach or whoever, right? And we only buy from companies who are a little bit more mature, and where are your references, and will you be around in 6 months from now, and so on and so on. So, and the trick that we had to get credibility was, in our case, we teamed up with consultants out there, freelance consultants, who were trying to differentiate themselves from the larger consulting companies, and present themselves as a little bit more innovative, a little bit more edgy, and so on and so on. And a lot of them did a whole lot of marketing just for themselves. So they were writing books, they had blogs and all of that. And we convinced probably 5 or 10, we convinced many, but 5 or 10 were really crucial for us, because they were the trusted advisor for some of those, most boring companies out there in the marketplace. So this really helped us accelerate the sales cycle most, to get that credibility in the marketplace. And then it was probably the time 2010 or so, when suddenly prospects really started turning into customers. How much time do I have? I could talk for one or two more stories. One more story? I'll tell you one more story. This was a little further down the line. This was 2011, so 2.5 years into the company. And one of our fiercest competitors at the time was Software AG. right? At the time they were doing okay, now they're like really dying. So they were one of the fiercest competitors. And at the time, CeBIT was still a thing, right? I told you we went to these events to physically meet customers. And CeBIT was still a thing. Now it's not so much anymore. And these big software companies, Software AG included, they throw these parties, right? And you go there in the evening, and they have buffet and drinks and everything. A friend of ours, he was an employee of Software AG, so he could organize these wristbands so you can get in and join the party. And we said, if we can't beat them in the marketplace, we will drink them into bankruptcy tonight. If anything, we can do that. So what's the fastest way to drink the company into bankruptcy? Well, you have to go to the source to get maximum bandwidth, right? So I sat next to the bartender where the cocktails were being produced, because these were the most expensive drinks, I guess. We didn't have to pay. And to have direct access and drink one after the other. The guy next to me, actually, he was doing exactly the same thing. He was a little older, probably 30 years old or something. He was doing the same thing. So he was quite nice, because he was drinking like crazy like I was. And so we got to talk, and it was super nice. And so after 15, 20, 30 minutes, I said, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Gero. And he says, I know who you are. I say, how can it be? You run this company called Signavio out of Berlin. And you steal all of our customers. I was like, really? This guy must be confusing me with somebody else. But that was the time when we started creating traction in the marketplace. And oftentimes customers decide for you long before you know it, right? But he knew it for some reason. So I asked, so, sorry, I don't know you. Who are you? And he was the chief marketing officer of Software AG. So one of the four guys, so they have 4 people on the executive board, and he was one of them. And I said, oh, interesting. So you guys actually notice us? That's interesting. So what's your opinion? I don't know what you do, but you do magic over there in Berlin. And he said, you know what? Every quarter we do this analysis of our competitors. We're super paranoid, and we always ask ourselves, who is going to destroy us one day? Who's the most dangerous company? And I said, oh yeah, interesting. So who is it? You. So you must be wrong, right? So we're this 15, 20 people company out of Berlin, happily doing our stuff, but this can't be true. But then he said one last word before he actually left to take care of his customers or whoever. And he said, but there's one thing why I'm still optimistic. You guys only seem to be active in Germany. All of your customers are in Germany. It's an important market, but if you leave us the rest of the world, we're just fine. Note to myself, which country to invade next? So this was basically one of those many points in time where you think, wow, this now some switch is flipping. So this was the first time probably when we discovered our own ambition and thought about building a real company, a significant company for the first time. Maybe the last thing, and then I open the floor to questions maybe. Why did we do the fundraise so long into the company? So we grew nicely. So we always had growth rates somewhere between 60, 80, 100% every year. So it was pretty good. And we ran the company very profitably. So in 2015, we had probably an EBIT margin of 35%. So it was pretty cool to have a fast-growing business and at the same time being very profitable. So we really, we were really cautious on spending money, which was good in a way, but also bad and holding us back in another way. So at that time, 2015, we were roughly 70, 75 people in the company. And the 2 triggers for us to go on a fundraise was First, one of our co-founders, one of my colleagues, he wanted to sell, and he wanted to leave the company. He was burnt out, couldn't do it anymore, and he wanted to not only leave the company operationally, but also sell his shares. So basically leave it behind him. And we simply didn't have the money to buy him out. And the second reason was, at the time with 75 people, we were, some person called it cheap and cheerful team. So very inexperienced people. We typically hired them fresh out of university. Signavio was their first job. Everybody's super hungry, motivated and all of that, but not experienced at all. So we had no clue how a company would have to look like once it is, 150, 200, 500, 1,000 people. So we felt lost and not having any plan on how to build a scalable company. So this was basically the reason why we took on and went on a fundraising tour, and took a long time to do that. So the whole process was, we started in summer, closed in December, and very, very closely looked at the different investors, the kind of philosophy they have, the people that worked in these funds, because you have to work with them very closely. What's their view on the company, what's a perfect outcome for them, and so on and so on. So we were in the lucky position to be able to choose. Many funds wanted to invest, but we then, took our time to really select the one that was the best fit. Actually, they only had the third best commercial offer. So we had two other funds that gave us higher valuation, less liquidation preference, all of those things. But we chose the one, Summit Partners we went with, who seemed to be a better match for the company from a culture perspective, from long-term vision and all of that. So if I had an hour more, I could talk about the second piece and all of the things that changed, but maybe one or two questions will go into that direction as well. So thank you, and looking forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much for that insight. Very interesting. But apparently the situation has changed from when you did your magical trick to today. What would be the topmost recommendation you would give to a bootstrapping startup these days? Having a good scene in Berlin, a lot of money around, but maybe different issues, different problems. What would be the most important thing from your point of view?
I mean, the number one recommendation is to build a great company, right? So, and it doesn't matter whether it's bootstrapped or whether it's funded. Bootstrapping has many advantages. One is you have a much better sense of reality, and you have a much better sense of how hard it is to earn money and how easy it is to spend money, right? Building a big team is super easy. Building big revenue is super hard, right? And bootstrapping is teaching you that. It also teaches you a couple of fundamental principles. So, for example, check your bank account every week. Sounds easy, but once you hire a professional team, and then suddenly you realize something's wrong, and cash levels are going gangbusters. And now we have a 3-month window to do the next fundraise, right? Nothing is more horrible than that, because you have to sell your soul in such a funding round. So bootstrapping tells you, funny, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. No one has done software, all of them mechanical engineers. And when I created the company, my father told me one thing, and he said, it might sound crazy and people will tell you otherwise, but the one lesson to learn when you run a company is to earn more than you spend. I said, that sounds obvious. And he said, you'll see. It's not so obvious in Berlin.
Thank you. I'm enjoying your talk. Like one of the best talk I've seen so far for the last couple of months. I want to ask a simple question. When did you get your first salary after bootstrapping, or you still haven't had any until now. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows?
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, funny. We paid our first salaries probably after 2 years. Why? Because we took on, again, public funding from the IBB Profit, which is a great tool. They changed the program a little bit. Now it's a little bit less beneficial for the founder. But anyways, so we took some, because it was free money for adding to the balance sheet. And the one feedback that we got was, your company is not for real because you're not paying salaries. So actually the feedback came from them that they said, if you want to be a fundable company, if you will, through the IBB program, you have to pay yourself a salary. So that was a trigger for us. I mean, not paying a salary is easy when you're young, when you don't have kids, when you don't have any, any obligations, no responsibilities. It becomes much harder when you're a little bit older, once you have a family and so on and so on. So this is a struggle I see, many companies have, because being hard to yourself is one thing, but being hard to the people around you is a different thing. So that's why, for a founder who's 23, I say, you shouldn't get a salary for, as long as you can possibly do it. Or just have, I don't know, 500 euros a month, because that teaches you to be, modest and humble and all of that. But later on, it's simply not possible, and it's not a good thing, because it negatively affects your family. So if once you have kids and all of that, you should pay yourself a salary.
You said at the beginning you were 4 founders and you had 8 interns. Were these 8 interns really needed at the beginning? Because I read once a bootstrapping article where the title said, hire your first employee once you have 1 million of revenue.
In our case, they were needed. We wouldn't have been able to ship the product because we had like a big mountain, a big pile of work in front of us to build just functionality to have a shippable product. So that people would be able to pay money for it. We were very lucky because coming fresh out of university, you still have you still know people, and for us it was easy to convince them that this was a cool thing to do, right? So we had 3 meals a day together in the company. So we had breakfast together, we had lunch together, we had dinner together, and it was just a way of living, right? And actually, for the first 5 or 6 years in the company, we always had the policy that we only hire people that we can imagine being best friends with, which is it a smart policy? I don't know, and it only works for so long. But for us, what really worked and also created a great culture was to always see the company more than a thing that builds a product and makes money, but is more a place where it's a family, right? So that changes over time. And at some point you hire the first girl. You have to take down these, posters from the walls, and you have to care about what kind of jokes you make and all of that, right? So that was probably one of the big culture shifts in the company. Because before it was just, I was the oldest founder, so I was 26 when I founded, when we started. Youngest founder was 23, and everybody else was similar age. So it was really it's just a circle of friends doing fun stuff together.
Hi, I got a question. My name is Jan. Great speech, by the way. I wanted to ask you about the salesman that you spent 90% of funding. Did that give you a somehow lesson, or do you regret that?
No, it was the best thing to do. So, I mean, initially, because all founders were engineers, right? All 4 founders were engineers, and all 8 interns were engineers. So we were, when we started with 12 people, it was 12 engineers. And we thought, the way to build a successful company is just to build a great product, right? And everything else will fall into place. And the one thing that we realized very early on is that at least in the company you have two things that you need to be good at. One is building a great product, and the other one is you need to be good at selling. And this still is the case with the company today, that these are the two core functions, where for each area you need, world-class people doing that. And it taught us the lesson of how to do sales. But sales happens on different levels. So sales first happens in the mode of running with a machete through the jungle, fighting for opportunities, right? Fighting for deals. So this is the first thing that you need to get right. You got the thing there that you want to get, and what's the fastest way to get there? Then the second thing, when you grow bigger, second thing is how do you make a sales team productive, and how do you lead 5 divas in the room, where everybody thinks he's the greatest person that ever was born onto this planet. That's the second level, and then the third level, this is the stage that we're in now, or we have been in for the last 2 years, is how do you build an architecture, a machine? How do you build a repeatable system where you could just add 100 additional people, and the thing will work with, will leverage that additional capacity to the full extent, and will not fall apart or will not, show crazy behavior.
Maybe one last question for the next talk. Yeah, there was only.
Yeah, thanks for your talk so far. One question regarding your freelance consultants. Would you say these were your early influencers, or had you clients who basically spread your word? Or?
So, most importantly is you need to understand how you get to your customer, right? And now there's so much more knowledge about how to build a SaaS company than there was 5 or 10 years ago. So if you go to, for example, conferences like SaaStr in San Francisco, when I went there the first time 1.5 years ago, I went there, wow, there's so much knowledge out there, how you build a great and fantastic company, all of the things that we struggled finding out ourselves. There's so many things that other people already know and have tried out and work. And for you, it took 4 years to get to the same point. What was the question?
Had you some kind of early influencers, some kind of companies?
Yeah. So the one thing that in our type of business model, SaaS company, what you need to get right is the path to the customer, right? And you want to be direct. You want to have direct sales. You want to have a direct customer relationship. You want to have your hand on the pulse of the customer, right? You need to be sitting on their laps, right? Influencers, partners are always a necessary evil if you do enterprise software. You can never control them. They have their own interest. We thought, well, we build a great product, so let the partner sell for us. So very early on, we tried to partner with companies like T-Systems or KPMG and those types of companies, and we failed miserably because we didn't understand how they work and what their incentive structures are and what they think about what a great client engagement is. So we figured that partners, so freelance partners one thing, but the same holds true with bigger partners. Partners only start to run if they lose business if they don't partner with you. Only then they start to run. Before that, they don't run at all. You have to push them as, Our KPMG partnership, for example, only became good traction because they were about to lose a big deal with Zalando, and they were a big customer of ours. And Zalando said, what the fuck, you're not even certified on Signavio. And this is the platform that we're using, end to end here at Zalando, right? We switch you out for PwC because they are certified. So next day they call and say, well, how can we get 50 people certified on Signavio? Right? This is when they start to run. But they're always, partners are always a necessary evil. You have to build your own strong company and a strong path to the customer and build strong relationships with customers. Never let any intermediary get in the way.
That's great. Thank you so much, Gero.
a lot of fun.